It's called the boardroom. We'll start with the CDA. Sonia, would you please call the roll?
Chair Bussey?
No, CDA.
CDA roll. Chair Stolper?
Here.
Alder Wood?
Here.
Alder O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Kelly? Here. Mr. Surdick is excused. Scott Kelly? There's one chair here. Andrew Hadberg?
Here.
Mr. Lombardo?
Here.
Here.
Chair Bussey?
Here.
Mr. Chris Homburg?
Here.
Ms. Thomas? Here. Mr. Stein?
Here.
Mr. Dorschel?
Here.
Ms. Fox? Here. Mr. Ganser?
Here.
And Alder Holmquist will be joining us in a couple minutes.
Okay. Thank you. We are in session. Both groups have a quorum. Before we begin the university presentation, Alderman Wood, who is right over here, would like to make some personal remarks. So, do you want to go over there, or do you want to do it here? I don't really care. It's up, whatever you want to do.
No microphone here. So should be very brief. Members of the Plan Commission, the Community Development Authority, and those present in the audience this evening, and I understand it's being recorded as well. I just wanted to make a few personal remarks that will take about 2 minutes, I think. To quote Lou Gehrig today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of this earth. And why is that? On Monday, November 28th, 2016, celebrating a delayed Thanksgiving dinner with my family, I suffered 3 seizures in the span of about 5 to 10 minutes. We were watching the Packers game at the time, so I'm blaming Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCartney for that. Although I wanted to finish watching the Packers game, more rational minds prevailed. And I actually did. I really did want to stay and watch, but it was nuts. I was transported to Meriter Hospital by Monona paramedics, volunteer firefighters, with the assist from the Monona Police Department. The seizures squeezed and twisted my brain like Torquemada's inquisitorial torture machines. I spent the next 9 days in the hospital, 7 in the intensive critical care unit and 2 in the intermediate critical care unit. I cannot with full honesty recommend the experience, however. I have few independent memories of those days, particularly the first 7, but I'm reliably informed I was not always the most cooperative patient. You might find that hard to believe. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home from the minute I got there, which was not rational at all. Having passed perilously close to the Porte de Mort, or death's door, on Tuesday, December 6th, I returned home a changed man. Everything before me now is a second chance. I especially need to thank the Monona public safety staff who got me to the hospital in time to save my life, the medical staff at Meriter who not only provided superb care but endured a sometimes irrationally obstructive, not to say obstreperous, patient. I especially need to thank my partner Beth, my 4 children, Lindsay, Brittany, Lacey, and Tyler, who all endured the grim spectacle of my near-death experience, having 3 seizures on the couch in my living room. And more importantly, unwaveringly supported me for those 9 days at the hospital on a 24/7 schedule. There was almost always at least one or more of them there. They have continued to support me since then, as have my sister and brothers and many close friends. I've made a remarkable physical and mental recovery over these recent days, one that was spectacularly unlikely and that I had no right to expect. I was actually sent home with a walker because we had some steep stairs going down to the basement. But, I was concerned about walking, so I wasn't going to go down those stairs. I used that for about 2 hours after I got home and said, I don't need this thing. So I'm actually my daughter turns 27 on December 21st, and she's going to get it as a birthday present. I'm guessing she won't accept it. Anyway, this is all why I stand before you tonight as the luckiest man on the face of this earth. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have the presentations. Sonia, are you going to introduce or kick this off, please?
Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. This is part of a one-year program that the City of Monona is the pilot partner in, the University Alliance and our university here. And tonight you'll be hearing presentations from 2 classes out of the 15 or so that we had paired with City of Monona projects this semester. So last week we heard 3 presentations at Community Media. We'll have presentations tomorrow at Parks and Rec and Thursday at Sustainability Committee. So the first group going tonight is a graduate student workshop class in urban and regional planning, and they'll present an update to our 2007 strategic housing plan. The second class going is Real Estate 611, residential property development, and they will be presenting redevelopment concepts for 2 blocks in the redevelopment area number 7, the area across from the high school between Dean and Lofty. Welcome to our professors in the room, Ken Jensko, Tom Landgraf, and Kurt Paulson, and our project manager on the university side is Jason Vargo, and a bunch of students, so thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Lutz, and behind me we have Alexander Brown and Rwanda McFerrin, and we are representing the housing group. In September, we were tasked to update the 2007 strategic housing plan through our urban and regional planning workshop. So basically, we tackled this project by dividing it into 4 major components. So today we're going to start off by talking about the recent progress made since the 2007 strategic plan and looking at the current housing market conditions within Monona. Secondly, we provided 2 separate ways for Monona to create new and diversified housing stock. We did this by looking at rehabilitating current homes within the city and by looking at new development through mixed-use development and small lot subdivisions. And lastly, we looked at an emerging housing issue of short-term rentals. So since 2007, Monona has accomplished a lot since their plan. They hired a code enforcement officer whose job is to hold landlords and homeowners accountable for negative neighborhood impacts. In addition, the Renew Monona program supplements this goal by providing financial assistance to get properties back to code compliance. They've already started diversifying the housing stock through certain projects like Trieste on the Water and the small lot subdivision on Femrite Drive. And lastly, there was a large amount of increase in senior housing through Frostwood 1, Frostwood 2, Heritage Senior Living, and they provided handicapped accessible living through Fairway Glen and Lake Edge. So the main goal of looking at current housing market conditions was to supplement the comprehensive plan that came out recently and to identify trends within the housing market. So we did that by comparing Monona to the largest 15 municipalities within Dane County. So an interesting takeaway from this section is that we found that Monona did have a large percentage of increase of single-family detached house rentals, but this is really mirroring a nationwide trend. So what is going on with this and why might this be happening? So there's been a tightening credit of standards for mortgages, and there's been a historically low multi-family unit vacancy within Dane County, and additionally there's a shortage of rental units with more than 2 bedrooms. Next, this section looks at, is Monona affordable for all of its residents? So We focused on two demographic groups, seniors and first-time homebuyers. And although Monona favors considerably with rental units and affordability, there's still room for improvement. So Monona's senior population has been expanding and is creating a demand for quality and affordable housing for both ownership and renters. Currently, there are 275 senior homeowners living alone. So as Monona continues to think about development plans, it's important to create affordable options for them and housing maintenance opportunities like the Renew Monona program. So moving on to first-time homebuyers, there are a lot of demographic trends that have hindered people from buying into the market, especially within millennials, and this is due to possibly marrying later in life, large student loan debt, or just the reduced availability of mortgage credit. But if you take away all of those components on the table, it's still hard to purchase a home within Monona. So let's say an elementary school teacher, the starting salary is $33,000. At that salary range, the teacher would not be able to rent or own within the city. Even if the teacher worked for many years and made the median salary range, they still would not be able to afford to live here. And this trend is comparable with construction workers and police officers and other people within this workforce area. So really, the big takeaway from this section is that there is a demand for programs like Renew Monona, and there's room for first-time homebuyer assistance programs. And Alexander will talk about the funding of all of these programs.
All right, thank you. For the next few minutes here, we're going to discuss a lot of the funding sources here that would aid in housing and the diversification of the housing stock, as well as ways to fund first-time home buyer programs, as well as down payment assistance here. So if we're talking about existing home buyer programs, we identified 4 key programs that homeowners can take advantage of. One, as we mentioned, is already the Renew Monona Loan Program. Since 2010 through 2011, 20 out of 34 applications have been granted, and 13 projects have been completed from that. It's also serving a similar purpose through the state through the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Agency, the Home Improvement Advantage Program. Throughout our report, by the way, we're going to go through a wide litany of programs, and all the qualifications are listed in depth in those. Also through Project Home, which serves Greene and Dane counties, we have the major and minor home repair programs that give out loans anywhere from $5,000 to $23,000 for home repairs and energy efficiency updates, as well the minor home program as well, which gives out grants for below $5,000. That one, however, does have a bit more of a waiting list for potential home buyers. Moving on to programs for home buyers. We identified the WIDA Advantage Program, which gives out for mortgage purchases to qualifying potential home buyers as well. As we mentioned before earlier in this presentation, one of the key barriers for younger families is putting down the money for a down payment, whether that comes from high student loans or generally lower income. So we focused a lot of our efforts on identifying key down payment assistance programs. And through WIDA, they offer a down payment assistance loan as well, which acts as a second mortgage for up to $6,000. Also, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, which that federal bank also encompasses Wisconsin, their Down Payment Plus program is also an option. And there's other sources from outside of the government as well, ranging from the Realtors Association of South Central Wisconsin and Moving Out. And these loans can be used interchangeably as well. They're not necessarily exclusive. We also went through the Renew Monona program since its inception in 2007 and identified key ways to continue evolving the program. Came up with 4 criteria and recommendations. First of which would be to allocate a certain percentage of funds to code compliance. So that in an instance where a homeowner is found to not be in compliance, that program, the code officer could refer the homeowner to the Renew Monona program if they do not have the funds to make the improvements themselves. We also recommend negating the identified preference area criteria as part of the Renew Monona program. One, because most other city programs generally either use criteria that revolves around family income or housing value, and 2, we did not find a particular geographic advantage that would come from concentrating loans in a specific part of the city. We also would recommend shifting from a property-based eligibility requirement to that of a household income-based one, mostly because these would be criteria that would match programs both through WIDA and the Federal Home Loan Bank and would make things a lot easier for potential home buyers, we believe. Also, there might be possible expansion, fiduciary expansion for Renew Monona to fund other priorities, which leads us to the next point of using tax increment financing to fund affordable housing. Although we talk about tax increment financing mostly for major capital projects, provision in Wisconsin state law passed in 2009 allows for municipalities to hold their tax increment districts open for an additional year to raise funds for affordable housing initiatives. The exact language says that the additional year's increment can raise 75% or more of the additional year's increment to fund affordable housing initiatives, while the remainder goes to improving the housing stock. The language appears to be left intentionally vague on this subject. And so the next upcoming TID closure is TID 2 in 2018. So using this standard, if Monona were to use this provision in Wisconsin state law, 1.6 million would come from that additional year's increment, it's estimated, which would lead to 1.2 million for affordable housing initiatives and 400,000 for improving housing stock if we're to follow this 75-25% ratio. And the remaining future recommendations that we have are to expand the Renew Monona program. It's been going very well. And ensure more and or larger loans, create a down payment assistance program for first-time home buyers. This could be done through increased partnership with Dane County housing groups and could better leverage states and other programs. Also, starting a housing development fund could be an advantageous action for the city to take. This could provide additional gap financing, which would leverage the city's position to more effectively compete for low-income housing tax credits, which is a competitive process. With that, I will hand over redevelopment to Rwanda.
All right, so looking at redevelopment is important because you all have a finite amount of land to deal with. So thinking about how to best use that developable land throughout the future is what we're going to wrap up with talking about. And that's going to be done, at least according to our plan, through mixed-use development and small lot subdivisions. So mixed use is a primary part of smart growth techniques, calling for different land use activities in the same building or parcel. Increased walkability is part of it, and that is something that is attractive to people of all ages. And in Monona, mixed-use developments could be achieved through 2 different approaches. One is through zoning and concept plans that could be incorporated into future comprehensive plans or an amendment to that to help guide future development. Or through land banking, where the municipality would assemble the land and kind of sit on it until a desirable proposal is brought forth. So strategies that we think should be incorporated into future mixed-use projects is reducing the parking requirements, because that'll, again, enhance walkability. A mixture of both affordable and market rate housing, and then incorporating universal design and accessibility options to help seniors age in place. And currently, in the zoning code, mixed-use developments are allowed in retail business, neighborhood business, and community design districts. So small lot subdivisions are groupings of owner-occupied homes with similar or identical design on smaller lots, commonly called cottage homes. They're detached owner-occupied properties, and so are not the same thing as a condo, although on the surface they might look like a condo. And they are supported in Monona's comprehensive plan, which calls for diversifying the mixture of single-family housing stock. And as Emily said earlier, the subdivision on Femright Road is an example of this type of development. And so currently small lot subdivisions can be developed in planned community developments, which are only allowed in community development districts.
And some of the benefits tied to small lot subdivisions are all related to the fact that it is smaller parcels of land. So homeowners are able to save a lot of money in that they're not buying a full acre parcel, they're buying maybe a quarter of an acre or a eighth of an acre. So that automatically cuts down a lot of the cost of home ownership. And so the map that is shown, I'm not sure how clearly the colors show up, but there is a sort of light green, and that is some parcels that we've identified as potential spots for some of these small lot subdivisions. And that was based on proximity to Monona Drive or Broadway, or proximity to recreational or green space land use. And then preference was also placed on parcels that are in an existing TID district, an existing redevelopment area, in a community design district, and then there were a couple of other parameters in place for that as well. So the guidelines and policies that are presented in our plan are just that. There's certainly not requirements, just some ideas to maybe keep in mind moving forward with increasing this type of development. And so, 6 to 12 dwelling units per acre, on-site parking, whether that is an individual lot per home or a shared parking lot, but adhering to the existing environmental characteristics and criterion that you already have in place is important. And then for policy recommendations, there's 3 different approaches that could be taken. Creating a small lot subdivision ordinance, and so that would formally state that a small lot subdivision has to adhere to the existing standards. It would probably require a zoning rewrite or amendment to permit small lot subdivisions in areas that are not PCDs. A second approach would be creating small lot subdivision guidelines, and that would expand and formalize the recommendations in our report, and also state that you're working in conjunction with the existing guidelines. And then a third approach would be to make no changes to the existing policy. And this could potentially limit small lot subdivisions because you would still be restricted to having them only in the community design districts, and more zoning variances might result from that, depending on what parcels became available for future development. And ultimately, with helping to sort of facilitate this type of development, there are several things that Monona can work toward and sort of do to help developers, such as providing feasible site criteria, being available to help in the land assembly process, retrofitting and rebuilding roads and utilities, and encouraging community-oriented site planning. And so while short-term rentals are not a redevelopment issue, they are a policy issue, and so we felt that that was relevant to include in our plan. And it's kind of a difficult issue to take into consideration because it, balances homeowners' desire to increase their income, and then, the economic activity that tourists bring, health and safety concerns, hotel tax revenues, and the character of residential neighborhoods. So there's not one main constituent group. Everybody kind of has a say. And a lot of local communities have not adopted policies on this just because in the area there have not been a huge number of short-term rentals. And for you all to keep in mind, it's important to note that short-term rentals do fit the existing definitions of hotel and bed and breakfast and do not fit the existing definition of single-family homes because of the short stature of the stay. And so again, there are 3 potential approaches to take, such as prohibiting short-term rentals altogether, and that would require some sort of zoning amendment, stating that they're prohibited. Permitting with regulations, and this would, deciding what permitting process you wanted for the homeowner or the renter to, use their property in that way, and also what kind of monitoring would be done for parking, noise, and other nuisance complaints, and then also taking a hands-off approach, and that would be beneficial just because you have more time to sort of monitor the issue and take more sort of criteria into account with whatever approach to go forward. So in conclusion, we've shown sort of briefly and in our report that this community is facing some demographic changes, and you already know that you have an aging housing stock. So this, combined with the finite amount of land, calls for some creative redevelopment solutions and seeking external funding sources to help revitalize older homes. And there are a lot of resources and strategies available. And so hopefully the information that we've compiled will be beneficial to you all in the future. All right, thank you.
Does any member of either of the bodies have questions for these folks now? And if not, we'll still have another crack once we're done with the other group. But okay, you guys are off the hook for right now. Okay, who's next here?
Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting us here to talk with you this evening. I'm Tom Landgraf. I'm responsible for the 4 real estate classes that will be working with the university year program, 2 this semester and 2 next semester. In total, between the 2 classes, we'll have about 160 students, mostly all real estate majors, but from various backgrounds. Our plan for looking at the projects and the subjects that the city has identified spans both semesters. So the first part of the work we'll talk a little bit about today. I'm going to change the order of my presentation and go to the end of it, which links up to what the students were talking about that you just heard. So you're going to see some work in the spring semester of students actually getting on the ground and putting some numbers behind some of the concepts that the folks in urban planning have been looking at that. So you can get both the policy and then the application. And then we'll talk a little bit about the 8 projects that we worked on this semester. Let's see, we have a pointer. I guess we don't have a pointer. The pointer doesn't work on the screen. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, we don't have the. Okay, so the area that the class worked on in the baseball analogy, you can look at these projects as kind of the leadoff hitters for the rest of the group to come. But they were working on the very top end of your redevelopment area in redevelopment zone 7, lots 1 and 2. You'll see definitions in your handouts with large lot and small lot. So those are the large lots and small lots. There were 38 students. We broke them into 8 small groups so that you didn't get 8 different versions of what I thought ought to be on the site. We just turned them loose, and each group could pick one or the other or both sites. They could include residential, commercial, and retail. One thing we did kind of hold everyone to is to assume that land acquisition would be assessed value plus 10%. So we didn't have the groups trying to guess what the property might sell for. So that's what the price point was for the acquisition of the property. The other thing that we did not want the students to do is, if they couldn't get their project to work, we didn't want them to start pulling cost out of it. This is the front door to Monona when you're coming out of Madison. So the first thing you see shouldn't be something built on the cheap. So if they could not get a market rate quality development to work, the task was then to identify what the gap was, so that you all would have some idea of what's missing from the puzzle to be able to get something done there. So you have in your packet summaries for the 8 small groups. I'm going to just click through that. We'll come back to that. And I just want to close the loop on what's going to happen with these 8 projects. The students are not yet completed with all of the details, so they'll be finishing up fine-tuning their numbers. Sonia's coming to class tomorrow to go over final comments, and then there will be a detailed PowerPoint, anywhere from 10 to 20 slides per project. So there's a lot of data here. We're not going to go through it all tonight. But you'll be able to sort through it, and that will be project budgets and assumptions on financing and rent and other kinds of things. So you can see the basis on which the students made their assumptions. And then during the break between the fall and spring semester, Sonia and I will get together and, based on input from you all and from city staff, we'll pick features of each of the 8 projects that looked like things that might get off the launching pad here. And we'll end up with a couple, 3 very specified projects that a group of the students next semester will drill down on and really dot the I's and cross the T's. So this is kind of the what could possibly be done, and then it will get narrowed in next semester, so that by the end of next semester you'll be able to have a development plan for a couple of different concepts on those 2 sites that should get across the finish line. The other thing that I just want to tie into what you heard before from the students in Urpel is how do some of the things that they were talking about fit into what's going to happen next semester. This semester, as you saw, we had about 38 students. Next semester it'll be 80 plus. So we got a lot more hands working on a number of different things. One will be to look at those pocket neighborhood, small house development areas, look at varying price points, and identify places in the city where those could actually be implemented, look at costs, and come up with what it would really look like to build on that particular site. We're going to look at accessory dwelling units, which is getting to be a hot item. What can you put in your backyard? And we're also going to look at what can you take out of your backyard, because accessory dwelling units are starting to look like swimming pools. They're great for the current owner, but they're kind of a liability for the new owners. So how do you get them out of there once you've got them in? One of the concepts that the students will be looking at is using a steel shipping container as the skeleton, because as we all know, those can be lifted up and moved around. So from the outside and the inside, it looks like a regular house with drywall and 2x4s and insulation, but the interior is a skeleton that's not going to move around. So it can be removed or brought in, and it has a second life. It isn't going to the landfill after it comes out of somebody's backyard. We're going to look at issues with remodeling, energy efficiency, and renewable energy for both individuals who are in their home and want to stay there, but they need to improve the home. And then when a current owner leaves the house and it transitions to a new owner, there's always a question of, well, what could we do? And there really isn't a single source of data with some costs and some payback information and just a general what would it cost to do something with the house. And that also factors into if the city was going to have some sort of a financial incentive to help folks at certain income levels do this, what kind of an incentive would that need to be able to get the job done? And then looking at an aging in place scenario for the city as current residents age, and as we all know, your average age is higher than typical. So when those residents move, are they moving elsewhere into Monona? Are they moving out of Monona? And where would they move to? And what would attract them to that process of staying in the community? Perhaps in some of those redeveloped pocket neighborhoods, which might be more of a senior focus than all income focus. So Let me just quickly tell you then what the students worked on this semester, and there's some representatives from each of the groups here, so if you have questions when we get into it, you can, they'll be responding. The largest development was just under, well, probably about as close to $50 million as you can get, and that was both sites, and it was a mix of owner-occupied rental, residential ownership in the townhome scenario, and then also some commercial space. And you can see the listing here. For all of the 8 proposals, we calculated what the new property tax would be for the package. So, and it's compared to the existing tax, so you can see the difference. And of course, that in part drove the increment, because generally all of these we're going to use, we're going to request some or all of the TIF increment. So the class calculated what the natural question you would ask is, well, okay, what's this going to add to the city's value and its potential tax base. Some of the groups came up with names, so that's what you see on top. Others you'll just see group 4, group 5. They're still working on their name. It was a second group also had both sites. They did independent senior living, 165 units, and 300 units of underground parking. A lot of the groups found that when you pull up, at least on the larger of the 2 sites where the drive-up bank is located, you can put more parking underneath there than you probably can put housing up above. So a question is, well, if you have extra parking, who would rent that? And of course, the school is not very far away, and they're really strapped for parking. And of course, there are plenty of Monona residents who probably wouldn't mind parking their boat or some other vehicle underground. So generally on these, you'll see where they may have come up with, students may have come up with more parking than you have units for. Group 2 did just the large site. They had a mixture of multifamily rental and owner-occupied townhomes. And then on the upper right, you can see the breakout between the sources of funding, and then they also identified if there was TIF as part of their plan, the amount of the TIF. And in this particular case, you can see it's $1.5 million. Another large site went the direction of putting affordable, predominantly affordable housing, 18 market rate. Again, you can see a large number of parking stalls, and also commercial space on Monona Drive. Group 4 was also a large site. They were looking at apartments, townhomes, but a smaller number, 65 residential, 16 of which were market, and then some townhomes. Another large site group, a mixture of multifamily rental and owner-occupied townhomes. Most of the owner-occupied units were facing Gordon Street behind, to be a transition between what's on Monona Drive, the more dense rental and commercial, to transition into the neighborhood that sits behind it. And I saw from the earlier chart, the ERPL class identified that some of the areas for those neighborhoods that could be redeveloped included this area. So we'll certainly factor that into what happens next semester. Only several groups looked at the small site. It has some diseconomies of scale, but they looked at mixed use, ground floor retail, housing above, or a small amount of underground parking, and quite a few surface spots for the retail component of it. Another one of the small site proposals looked at multifamily and retail with some commercial space. Most of the groups had some retail and commercial space on Monona Drive. Not as much of a concentration as is there right now. But given the concentration of residential, there's a pretty significant trend in and developers putting things, commercial and retail, in buildings that support the residential, instead of the two just being there and not necessarily linking. And of course, the presence of the school generates some interest in certain types of retail and generates a lack of interest in other types. So the school is both plus and minus as far as what potentially would be an equal or a good fit for both sides of the street. And then one class, there was actually a ninth class, which is a small group of students working on healthcare-related housing. They looked at the large site, and they were moving with both independent and senior living in 2 phases, about 80 units in each phase. And then there would be owner-occupied single-family, again, on Gordon Avenue, transitioning between the two, the more dense units on Monona Drive and then the residential units behind. And this one proposal looks a lot like a pocket neighborhood because most of the residential units are facing inward. So really the backs, it doesn't look like the backs, but the backs would be on Monona Drive and on Gordon, and the interior space would be, or the green space would be on the inside. And this was again for seniors because their support group is a lot of other seniors. So creating opportunities for them to get together both in building and outside the building was part of this proposal. So those were the 9 groups. Again, residential, much easier to finance than commercial. A mixture of affordable, market rate, some condos. The students spent time looking at the development concept over on Femrite Drive, where you've got the, 6 small units on what was 2 city lots, and took that concept and tried to incorporate it where they could on their site as well. But we'll be ramping up the volume on finding more spots in Monona where that would work as part of the group's next semester. So that's an overview, and then we've got time for questions, either probably of both groups if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, you have a question?
Statement and then a question. Wow, this was great. I've been anxiously waiting to see what might come out of this project, and this has been a very important project during my term as mayor, and for the council to have made the commitment they did, and for the initial round of presentations that we've received in the last 2 weeks. We are certainly more than achieving the goals set forth in the beginning, and I only hope as we refine some of the rough edges of this whole process, being the guinea pig community, that it only gets better. So I'm appreciative of the breadth and depth of the presentations that, not just tonight, but with the documented presentations, and feel this again sets Monona apart from so many other communities, that we will have a handbook of success, as I look to some of our developer friends around the table, that when we can provide these kind of suggested, you've done so much of the initial legwork and homework that I hope will be of benefit to get us off on what is a difficult process, as was described. No one really likes looking at the small lot. And it's so important because of its location across from the high school and its great need of redevelopment. From the question side, I would open this up to any of the students, but I would be interested, initial impressions of Monona, and did those impressions change throughout the semester as you became more aware? And specifically, and I'd appreciate any candor, is this a community that you would find yourselves wanting to live in? If yes, what made you think that? And if no, what amenities or what is lacking that would preclude you from considering Monona home? And who wants to step forth first? Yeah, yeah. If anyone would.
Well, I think for those that are finding work, say in Madison, Monona is attractive just based on quality of schools. I think maybe a challenge is sort of a lack of, I guess, like trendy things to do for young professionals, I would say. I'm kind of cheating because I grew up in Monona, so I got my finger on the
And
pulse
you
of
left?
Monona. But I've also noticed, like the population is kind of shrinking, and the demographics are getting older. And that's evident to me. Just being on the board this year.
Candid?
Can I respond to that?
Yep.
I like your answer, and I think for the sake of this group up here, identify some things that you would consider trendy things to do. I think I know that answer, given all my children are your age. But I'd like to hear your response to
Sure.
that.
So our group had the larger site, and we were kind of thinking of a mixed-use development with retail along Monona Drive. And I just think local businesses, like boutique grocery, pizza, subs. We also had an idea of a restaurant on the corner of Monona Drive and Dean. And we're thinking, something you see on Monroe Street, on Atwood, Willie Street. Something that's unique, I guess, and maybe has a little bit of a nightlife also. I mean, not like a club, but something that you just don't go, to get there, and then shuts down at 8.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the mixed-use developments are cool. It's nice to be able to walk to shops and restaurants and stuff like that, not rely on a car.
I think their group had a corner bar that had rooftop fire pits. And,
Yeah, we had a bar on the roof there.
Are we going to be able to get to see some of the graphics that go along with this information?
That is one thing that I would say is I had the privilege of seeing all of them, so did Sonia, and you just got a very short flavor of, everyone had graphics and they all had really cool stuff, and I don't know how, are they going to see all the graphics?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, everybody will get the full, when Sonia and I were talking about this, being sensitive to your time, I didn't want to bring all 8 groups here, and their presentation that the city staff saw was about 15 minutes long per group, so it does include the graphics, and it does, or it includes an example of what they have in mind, an existing building that they might have taken a picture of and sat there and say, this is what we have in mind. So it will include all of that. And one of the things I can do for you, Mr. Mayor, is I can ask each of the groups to put in writing what, in answer to your question, with regard to Monona and maybe Sonia, and I can walk through with the group. One of the things that is part of all of the real estate classes that students take in their senior year is what's called a capstone class, and it's intended to get students into a real life project and meet real people. And of course, here we sit in a big room with the real people over there and the students over here, so.
We're not that real over here.
And they've been studying planning commissions and cities and city councils for years, so now they're facing one. So if they're a little bit hesitant to leap into the deep end of the pool, I'll get them to do the writing for you. And,
Thank you.
That would be greatly appreciated, because you're unlike any other group in that you've become enmeshed in the last 3 months in our community. You represent the demographic that we hope those alums will return to Monona, and for the newbies that there is something there. And if there are those shortcomings, we certainly want to know the people at this table are those who are looking to make this city great, help make this city great, and your insight would be so important in addition to the work you've done. But and in all candor, it would be great. So hopefully this has been a benefit. Yes, ma'am.
I can kind of answer the question too. So I'm from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin originally. So I'm kind of used to this smaller city thing. But my prior perception of Monona is probably not. It's a suburb of Madison, like a little on the quiet side. Like I've biked around the path and like run in the area and stuff like that. Like very nice city, and good schools like Joe mentioned. My group, and where I think Monona could improve is kind of similar, like maybe have some multi-family units so people can rent, but like keep the style of Monona, so it's, you know, kind of like that neighborhood feel, but that can still be like pretty trendy. In my group, we did commercial, retail, mixed-use apartments, and then some townhomes facing Gordon too. And our goal was just to create more of like a destination place, so not only like you can live there, but it was more of an L-shaped, and then behind it you could sit on a patio, like outside there was an indoor-outdoor restaurant, just like a place to go and like walk around, maybe like spend a few hours rather than like park or go to the bank or something. So it was just more of like a place to hang out rather than just one-stop shop.
I heard tonight that there was a possible recommendation to have developments with reduced parking because people would cut down on cars. But there's another group doing transportation, correct? And I hope you're talking to each other because our internal transportation is very limited, not only where you can get to by that, but also when. So if you're downtown working at state office at Jeff 1 and you get a call that there's an illness back home, it's going to be Uber time because your vehicle doesn't come until later in the day. And if you work on the far west side, chances are you're not going to get there unless you jump and do business with the city of Madison on their system. So keep in mind those challenges for individuals that are going to give up their vehicle. You're going to say?
If I can just preview, on Thursday, the transportation group in my same class will be mostly looking at walking and biking and primarily safe routes to school. But as a result of that, we did a survey of parents in the school district. And the overwhelming concern for a lot of people expressed, even in terms of being able to sell your house or buy the house, is the ability of kids to be able to walk to school without a lot of sidewalk facilities. So that came up a lot. So that is, a lot of people did mention that connection between housing and sidewalks, that's one of the amenities that may make it harder for someone to want to buy in Monona.
Not very walkable, is what you're saying.
Right, that a younger demographic that would be attracted to the urban amenities and the proximity to the lake and all the, I think, interesting employment in the area is looking for something that's walkable and bikeable.
Okay, gentleman back. Go ahead.
I did a series of interviews with various folks hearing the sort of what is your experience living in Monona, and that definitely was a theme as well that I heard in those interviews about access to buses and also the sidewalk was definitely something that came up as well. Actually, was that a friend of a friend decided to move to the Madison side of Stoughton Road specifically because there was better bus access for them to get into Madison from that side. So they were looking at house listings in Monona, but the Liberty decided not to move to Monona because of the transportation system. So that's something just to keep in mind, that potentially a bilateral agreement. I think Sudbury is entering an agreement with Madison Metro. That might be something to consider. Considering somebody that I interviewed said, I don't understand why the buses actually drive on Monona, drive but don't stop. Right? And so that maybe just
There's a long history.
You have all night?
Yeah.
We're happy to share
I'm coming in a second. Hang on just a second. Anybody else have any specific comments to the mayor's question? And then I'm going to go to Alderman Thomas, former Alderman Thomas. But
There's a couple comments, but about the sidewalks. Public Works last year did some things, so we didn't assess for the sidewalks because we thought we encourage people to put in sidewalks. And I haven't been on the last year, but I thought there was one project that they talked about doing sidewalks, and the people don't want them. I mean, I heard lots of people, young people say, you know, if we had sidewalks, our kids could bike on them, they could ride, it would be safer. But am I right in that the people on the street, with McKenna or one of those streets, didn't want the sidewalks? So sometimes you run against, and I'm sort of, it's interesting. I love looking at you guys, and I love looking at the demographic of looking at your page. For a long time, we had a family focus. And if our housing, and I look at this, we've done, I mean, for 34 years I've been looking at housing and retail in Monona, and I can tell you it's great to have help. The city is a challenge at best. Because when you do housing and you have families and you have kids, there's a cost to bringing those in, and sometimes the cost is greater than the resources and the taxes that they bring in, so it adds something to the existing property owners. And right now, one of the things that, I don't know how many of you see my Monona, but there are people in small houses in Monona that you have been writing like crazy. My taxes went up 16%, my taxes went up 20%. And it isn't because the mill rate went up that much. It is that we have been the victim of our own success, and property values have gone up so much that if you look at these old houses that for a very long time were underassessed, at least for the property, they have jumped up. And these people are, I mean, you see them, and I've had some people tell me they're struggling, they don't know how they're going to. So whatever we do, it can't add to the existing burden for the people who currently live here, because they're struggling. And if there's anything we could do to figure out how we help these people, because it wasn't a great mill rate increase, but it was, you know, the benefit. And they die and sell a house, they'll make a lot of money, but while they're living in it, how do they afford to do it? So that's one of the challenges I think that we face.
okay, Dale?
I just want to speak to Kathy's comments, because I think they're valid and something that will be very helpful for you to look at. The emphasis tonight was on housing, and then address some mixed use over across from the high school. But I think as I look at home taxes here, I really think the residential taxpayer is being burdened by the low-value commercial property up and down Monona Drive. And I think that also, Joe, speaks to what you were mentioning in terms of some interesting things to do in the community and some trendy things. And I think because we have so much of that commercial, that it's causing this problem with residential taxes. Yes, we've had success with housing here, but it really seems time to be addressing Monona Drive in an aggressive way. And I think that speaks to the mixed use that you're talking about, a higher density. So, I mean, anything that you can add to that conversation would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I think you'll see that when you look at the details of these 8 presentations, because as I mentioned, each of the groups has identified what the current tax base is, and for the combination of parcels 1 and 2, it's about, depending upon which year you use, it's about $58,000 a year in taxes that the city of Monona gets off all of the real estate in both Lot 1 and 2. The lead-off proposal that you saw, the big one, the $49 million, that generates about $500,000 of property tax, and it's a mixture of market and affordable. Now, again, it's a reasonable scenario, not probably a likely one right out of the box. It probably would happen in a couple of phases, but none of the groups that even did the small site ended up with anything less than at least a tripling of the property tax revenue.
I would think at a minimum,
Yeah,
at a bare
and if
minimum.
you add some single family in there, you really get a further bump. So you will see that. Two other quick things that I should mention is something that you'll be hearing more about, and certainly will be very present in the results of the second semester work, is the single most important impediment that the groups came up with to any development happening there is a land assemblage. Because you've got a lot of small parcels owned by individual folks, and you have to try to collect them. And you can buy the first one probably at market. The last one you will pay a huge price for. And one of the things that may be a solution to creating a destination and getting what you want there, instead of just what works there from the standpoint of the developer, is for the community to become more active in the acquisition of the property. You already own several parcels there, but my guess is if you owned it all, you would have a group at least this big of developers saying, could we pitch you on our plan? Because that land assemblage is the thing that really ties down the developer, because they have to put out a lot of real money over a period of time. Kind of like when you play hearts. Am I going to get the queen of spades and everybody else gets all the points, or am I going to end up holding them all? And that's a very real scenario. So we're going to do some work on that to see what.
You're going to buy all the properties?
Well,
there's a lot of students here.
Well, I tell you, if they knew you were going to buy them from them. But we'll look at the impact of that as well. The other thing that's going to be more focused in the second semester than it was in the first, and it ties to it, some Kurt's students talked about, is the fact that if you could in fact acquire all of the parcels in Site 1 and all of the land in Site 2, now you have something that could easily be a destination area. You've got enough square footage to put in multiple restaurants. If it's the happening place where all the restaurants are on, in Monona and in that edge of Madison, and it kind of somewhat similar to what you're doing over along the river, where you've got land and you're looking at a destination. So you might actually end up with two of them. One when you first come in Monona from Madison, and the other one on the overall line.
I guarantee you all straight A's if you can gather all those properties together. Some things are easier said than done as we sit with the river.
I'm not even going there. Doug?
Yeah. I have a kind of a scattershot of mainly of comments, and I think I have one question. You made the suggestion about being more aggressive in land assemblage, and I agree that's a key, and we've been working on trying to do that on the north end. It's somewhat been put on the back burner because we've been busy with the riverfront development, and we have limited resources to do that. We've also, Monona has traditionally not acquired real estate by condemnation, only once that I can recall in the last 16 years or so, and that didn't go real well. People were not, the owners weren't happy, and so that, which doesn't preclude being more aggressive, but identified other means, I guess, of how we would be more aggressive in approaching that issue. One of the problems on the north end of Monona Drive is a lot of the those properties have long-term owners who have been there a long time and don't have much debt, if any. Many of them don't have any debt on the properties, so they can cash flow with relatively small sales, and that's why you see some of the businesses that are there, because they can make money even without doing a large volume of sales. Let's see. With regard to senior housing part of this, I guess I would hope that the final report would identify the need for more senior housing, because we had I think 16 years ago we had two relatively small senior housing developments, one on Owen Road and one on Fimright. Since then we've added two relatively large senior housing developments, Frostwoods Commons and what's the one? What do we call it?
Heritage.
And Monona Heritage. So we've added several hundred units, I think, in total there. I think a key thing to address too would be, what kind of senior housing? Is it going to have independent living assistance? It's going to have some higher level of assistance. One of the things that makes the large, and they just said this, I'm having short-term memory issues. Heritage, thank you. Is that it does, you can go there independent living and then move to assisted, move to sort of memory care, that kind of stuff. Let's see. One other comment. We've found, I think, in the past that we may want what we want and what developers want to build and can make money on are not always the same. So how do you close that gap? How do you, what can we do to see that we get more of what we're looking for? Because often we're sort of at the mercy of the developers, frankly, what they want to build. Not always. If we're doing TIF assistance, that definitely gives us more control. But at some point, if we want it developed and we're not getting the proposals we want, we're probably in the past at least have been still willing to do TIF assistance. So. And then one question, I guess I know we've talked about sort of barriers to first-time home buyers or just even new purchases of housing. A barrier to that is income, and yet the current median household income in Monona is $56,000, a little over $56,000. Just it wouldn't seem that in itself would be a tremendous barrier, to new home buyers. So I'd be interested to hear any comments now or in the final report about that. I suspect part of that is because a lot of people have been in their homes, stayed in their homes, never left there. So that's all I have.
Okay. Did you have something?
No.
If anyone wants to answer.
Does anybody have a response for?
Yeah, the median household income is the household income of people already in the city.
Right.
And that's always substantially higher than the median income of first-time home buyers.
Okay.
And then when you include high levels of student loan debt, and I don't know if you're aware, but a couple of years ago when Dodd-Frank passed, there was an upper limit on debt to income for mortgage underwriting. So with student loans or car payments, that makes it harder for first-time home buyers to get mortgage credit.
Okay. In the back, did you have some additional?
Yeah, so I have a background working in higher education, and so the
average student loan debt in the country is about $20,000, which breaks down to about $200, slightly more depending on interest rate, monthly payment. And so even, making like $40,000 a year, which is, probably like what a lot of people fresh out of college shoot for, that's a pretty significant chunk of your income. And then just anecdotally, like I'm in my late 20s, and all of my friends that have bought houses have, done so because of assistance from their parents. So there are like significant burdens to buying a house when you want to. So.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I think all of my kids have it, probably.
Don't say anything.
They have
Stays here.
a significant amount of student loan debt.
But you're bankrolling them all in advance. So.
Yeah.
Former Alderman Thomas, you have the floor. Some of these people are just incorrigible.
Doug's comments about the senior housing. One of the things I'd be curious about is what is, as a community, what is our ratio of housing units to the population? Because I'm never quite sure when we build senior housing, whether it serves Monona people or whether we bring in more people. And I don't wish to become, I say this, and I'm the oldest one here, I'm sure, by a long way. I don't wish to become the Sun City of Wisconsin. And so I'd like to take care of people, bring their parents in, but I don't want to overdo it because I like to keep a balance of people. So it would be interesting to see the ratio where Monona fits with other communities in terms of how many units.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Tom?
Oh, Andrew.
I'm a member of the CDA. I'd like you to think about maybe a little bit between now and then what we could do along Monona Drive when you're looking at the development area number 7, specifically with these 8 proposals or 9 proposals, to incentivize developers to put in the cool stuff, the stuff that makes you want to live there. That's one of our biggest challenges when we try to develop mixed-use environments, is the commercial element of it. We struggle with it mightily, right? The low-hanging fruit's the residential. That's easy stuff. There's all kinds of ways to make that happen. The vacancy rates are so low around here that apartments are easy. The tough part is that thing that makes it a place that you want to go, and a place that you want to live. And what elements we could include in this mixed-use environment, and how do we get the developers to incorporate that? And, as an entertainment venue, restaurants, bars, clubs, whatever, retail, employment, all of the things that we all want in a neighborhood that we can walk or bike or maybe drive to, is still okay. But that's the tough part, is getting the master developers to incorporate that commercial element of the project. And I'd like you to just maybe give some thought to how we accomplish that. How do we incentivize them? How do we motivate them? And probably most importantly, to identify this is what you should be putting in that will bring us here. If you want us, this is what will get us here. That's fine.
Well, and that's going to be a significant piece of what one of the classes does next semester, because the commercial is always a tough piece for developers, as you point out. The low-hanging fruits residential, you can easily get cash from the bank to put that property together. There are investors out there who invest in it, but when you talk to the same bank about borrowing money for commercial, they want to see an operating history of the commercial tenant. Well, that cuts out any kind of startup or mom and pop type of commercial. And
to some degree, don't they just want to see the residential carry the burden and then the commercials a toss in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's tougher to do as well. So I know one of the things that I've seen some experience or seen some data on is where the incentive doesn't so much go to the residential piece, but the incentive goes to writing down the commercial rent to be able to get that to the point where non-chain types of commercial income, and especially restaurants. Restaurants is what keeps people in the neighborhood. A business that sells a product that you buy and then leave and take home, and it doesn't really keep people in the neighborhood. It does create some revenue, but it's not. It doesn't add to the community aspect of it. So that's something that we're going to look at more specifically. We didn't do it this semester because we were just kind of trying to get the universe and then narrow in on it. But you hit the nail on the head, because you can't borrow a lot of money for commercial right now unless you have really bankable tenants, and that's going.
Doug?
First of all, I forgot to say earlier that I think both of these reports are excellent. They're going to be great resources for the city. Just superb. And I really, in particular, liked the idea, and I guess to some extent I'm talking to the CDA members here, but really like the idea of expanding the use of the Renew Monona program. I think when TID 2 retires, that's kind of our main chance to do something, and because we're looking at, I think, was it 1.6 million? Mm-hmm. You know, I think we've funded it in the past at what, 20,000 a year, something like that, maybe a little more. So that's going to be key, that we look at, you know, what are we going to do with this 1.6 million, because it's of an entirely different scale than we've been involved in before.
Former Alderman Thomas.
My last comment. It's very interesting. We've tried for, as you may know, for years to get high-end retail and to get retail out here. And actually, at one time, Southdown had some of the best women's shops in the city, and they don't last out here. But what is interesting to me, and the trend that I've seen lately, is vintage and repurposing stores. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you build that, but it fits in with the kind of things that students are interested in. But you've got Cozy Home, and that's expanding, and that's going down Monona Drive. There is a repurposing gift shop, which is going, and they're all doing very, very well. And I've seen communities, Cedarburg is one I think of, but I've seen communities where they made, because they're destination oriented, so they draw people there to go to the restaurants and to go to the shops. And so I don't know how you get them, I don't know what you do, but I tell you, I think it's coming to Monona, and it fits with the Near East Side that's sort of moving this way, and with the young people and with what people are doing now. And I think we could somehow get more of them to come here, because they tend to draw each other. If one is there, another is there, and they shop back and forth between them.
Okay, it's 8:18. I want to be respectful of people's time, so last shot. Okay, let's finish this section. Each of the bodies has been convened, so we will suspend each of the meetings. Plan Commission stays here. CDA goes across the hall. And thanks to all you folks for coming. Appreciate it.